Thanks for tuning in. This is a Sweet Cyclist. Today we're going to be looking at the Blaze 400, 600, and 800 SLX bike lights. Today we have a very interesting review of the Planet Bike Blaze SLX series of headlights. Planet Bike has been kind enough to provide us with all three versions of the latest headlights. We have the 400 lumen, the 600 lumen, and the 800 lumen version. As you can see, they all have the same form factor, but they have different battery capacities to achieve the higher lumen ratings. Planet Bike is also a great company you may be more familiar with through their Superflash taillights. They also have the Superflash and courtesy modes integrated with these headlights as well, which is a really nice perk for daytime riding. They're also a great company in terms of support. You can always get spare parts by just calling them up or going through their website with free shipping. Now let's go ahead and open one of the packagings up and we'll take a look at what comes in here. I also want to note the packaging is really well done. It's environmentally conscious. There's no plastic here. And the overall design is really nice. It really displays well on the shelf with everything you need regarding the weight, the lumen output, the IP66 rating. It's all printed on the back for quick accessibility. Let's go ahead and take this out. In terms of specifications, there are three versions. You have the 400 lumen, which is a $43 light. We have the 600 lumen version, and that has a $55 retail price. And then we have the 800 SLX, which is $65 and 800 lumens. All of these are micro USB rechargeable. And as I mentioned, they all have the same form factor as well. They have the clean beam design. And you can see that here if we do a little close-up. These are the vertical deflectors that spread out the beam. In terms of battery capacities, the 400 has a 2,200 milliamps. The next one up is 2,600. And finally, the 800 features a 3,350 milliamp battery. They all have these integrated side cutouts as well, which is really great for side visibility. They all have multiple steady modes, as well as a courtesy and super flash. This is very similar to Light in Motion Safe Pulse, which has an irregular pulsing to really draw attention for daytime riding. In terms of what's in the packaging, very simple. You get a user manual. So you have the user manual, you have a micro USB charging cable. You have the headlights themselves, and as you can see, they all have the same form factor. And finally, you have the mount. And the mount is pretty interesting. It's a cam design. So you can see no tools required, which makes installing and uninstalling very simple. So now that I have everything out of the packaging, let's go ahead and weigh these lights. Planet Bike claims they have the same weight, which is not surprising considering the same form factor. The 400 version is 120 grams. If we look at the 600, we have 120 grams. And finally, the 800, which should have the highest battery capacity, is, surprise, surprise, 120 grams. If we look at the mount, that comes in at 26 grams. So overall, pretty lightweight for these headlights. So now let's take a look at the fit and finish of the Planet Bike Blaze SLX headlights. They all have the same form factor, so we'll review one and discuss any differences. If we start out on the front, these all have Cree LEDs with the clean beam design on the lens. And what this means is that it has vertical deflectors which distribute the beam horizontally. As you can see here with it on the mat itself, we have a very horizontally distributed light which reduces the glare. This is not a proper beam cutoff, but does a good job at reducing the glare a bit. You have really nice shielding on the top of these lights as well. So when you're looking down, you shouldn't be blinded by the light. With some models, I've noticed if you don't have this kind of shield, once you get out of the saddle, you'll actually blind yourself with your own headlight, which is unfortunate. They all have this torpedo style profile to them which tapers at the end and the front. The front portion of the headlights is a metal body, which improves the heat dissipation. They also have this powder coated style finish with the metallic flake to them, which looks pretty good. On the sides, you have the logo and the model number imprinted on there. the Planet Bike logo on the rear portion, and the other side is unadorned as well as the rear portion. You have these little cutouts on the sides, which should also improve the heat dissipation. On the bottom, you have your micro USB port, which is a standard offering with a nice large rubber cover to prevent any dust or water getting in. You have a standard slot style mount here that works with their proprietary mount. In terms of controls, you have a single button interface, and it has a very large rubber button which has great tactile feel. It's really easy to operate. It's a single click to cycle through. Now the different lights here have different number of modes. The higher power ones have more levels in terms of high, medium, low. They all feature the courtesy mode as well as the pulsing mode, which is their Superflash. And that's similar to Light in Motion's Safe Pulse, which has an irregular pulsing to attract attention. So if we see here, this is the regular mode. You can see the beam is really well distributed horizontally. You have different steady levels. This is the flashing mode. And then we have this courtesy mode, which is a nice kind of pulsing mode, which is good at drawing attention without distracting people. A long hold will turn it off. And you also have memory management. So if you turn it off at a specific mode, when you turn it back on, it'll be in the same mode. In terms of differences between these, there aren't actually any. It's just the model number. They all weigh the same amount, and they just have different battery capacities to achieve the different outputs. They do have a different Cree model for the LED in the 400 version, which is the lower powered version. The mount is something that's also really interesting. It's kind of a standard rubber strap design, but this cam design makes it really easy to install and uninstall. So you can see here, now that I have the top cover off, you simply pull back and that releases the strap mechanism. It's a really trick mechanism. I've never seen something like this before. Now, this was at the furthest setting, which accommodates the smallest diameter handlebar. If I want to adjust that, I have two different positions. I can go at the center location or at the front location. Now you can see it provides you a much wider range of a larger diameter. And reassembly is the same as the opposite of unassembly. We simply slide that rear tab in, push down, and then rescrew this back on. Now obviously it's a little bit inconvenient as it is as you require a tool, but typically you don't swap between different handlebar diameters. And I do like that you don't have to store different diameter straps. If you look at my closet right now, I have a lot of boxes for different headlights and all the straps and different mechanisms that come with it, which gets to be pretty cumbersome to kind of keep track of. All right, now that that is secure, you can see I simply readjust this, and now I have a much wider diameter here. So if you're watching this review, you're probably wondering which Planet Bike Blaze SLX should I buy? In order to answer that question, I've laid out some of their competitors, starting from the left to the right, where this is the 400, 600, and 800. If we start with the 400, you can see it has a very bulky size as it shares the same form factor with the others. That's one big downside with this. With 400 lumens, you don't need such a large bodied light. However, Planet Bike has done a great job in terms of pricing across the range. This is a $43 headlight for the 400 SLX. If we look at one of its competitors, the Topeak 450 USB, as the name implies, is 450 lumens. However, it comes in at $50, and although it does have a lot smaller form factor. Also, if you go lower powered, you can get more commuter style lights. Again, this is $50 though. This is the Light in Motion Pro. It has a lot of smart features, and again, a lot more compact and lightweight compared to the Planet Bike. So across the range, I think that's one drawback. A more interesting comparison is if we look at the Blaze 600 SLX, which is $55. Its nearest competitor, I think, would be the Light in Motion Urban series. This is a really popular series of lights. However, they're a little bit more simple. They have a very simple design with no clean beam or deflectors, a very simple spotlight. And again, the Urban 700 I have here retails for $70, while the Planet Bike 600 SLX is only $55. So you can definitely save some money. This one feels a little more substantial, and I think I like the design better. Looks a little more modern, and again, a little more compact as well, which is nice. If we go up to the higher power 800, overall I'd recommend definitely buying the most lumens you can, as you can always run the 800 at a lower setting for longer versus some of the lower powered one. And if you ride in more dark trails, I definitely recommend having something closer to 1000 lumens. I think the nearest competitor for the 800 SLX is the Fenix BC21R version 2. It's a really cool light, $75, removable lithium-ion battery, which is huge, and a very cool battery indicator. So with all the Blazes, the only battery indicator you have will be a little LED behind the main button, which will turn on once it's low. With the Fenix, I can actually check at any time and get a little more granularity. Again, same theme overall. The Planet bikes are bulkier in terms of all the shapes and sizes. These have the same sliding and same USB port designs, while the Fenix is actually USB Type-C, which is great. However, again, $75, while the Blaze is only $65. And if you have a higher budget, you can also get a little more sleeker and compact lights. This is a Magicshine Ulti 1000. This is an $85 light, but it features a integrated DRL, and one of the best features, the Garmin mount. So you can put this in your out and front mount instead of having to use the proprietary sliding mount. And again, more compact, smaller size, and I think a better, more modern design. I also wanted to point out that the cam style mount is very similar to the Fenix, but I think what Planet Bike has done with the adjustable positions to accommodate different diameters is really slick. So if we look at the Fenix version here, it has the same kind of cam style that slides in and out. Toolless, so really quick. However, use different style pads, different thickness pads to accommodate different diameters. And this means you have to store these somewhere and then try not to lose them. So I think a really great kind of clever solution from Planet Bike in terms of the mount. Now let's look at the light output of the Planet Bike Blaze SLX lights. First, let's take a look at the beam shape. On the right, I have a cross section of the beam. And as you can see, it's very horizontally distributed thanks to the clean beam design. On the left, you can see a side shot of the beam. As you can see, the shielding on the top surface of the light helps prevent some of the glare, but otherwise it's a kind of standard distributed beam. Now we'll cycle through all the different modes. I'll go through the 400, the 600, and 800. They all have a high-low setting, with the 600 and 800 having medium settings as well. For each of these settings, I'll show the lumen output and the claimed runtime. You can see courtesy mode here looks a little flickery. However, it's just very constant mode, and then it ramps up and down. And Superflash on camera looks really strange as well, but it is very high frequency pulsing that I would not recommend on a nighttime trail. Now that you've seen all the different modes, we can compare the high modes for Blaze 400, 600, and 800 side by side. There's not many obvious differences here, but if you look closely, you'll see that the 400 has less distribution due to lower power, while the 600 has a wider beam, and then finally the 800 has a wider beam with a further reach. We found the lower settings, medium settings, to be pretty sufficient for the 600, 800, while the Blaze 400 needed a high setting if you want to ride on darker trails. Now let's go over the pros and cons for the Blaze SLX lights. I really like that they're very affordable. Regardless of which level you buy, the 400, 600, or 800, they're cheaper than the competition. The courtesy and Superflash modes really help improve the daytime visibility. And then with the side cutouts, you get 275 degrees of visibility. So again, really nice to have at nighttime. What I don't like about these lights is the fact that they're a little bit bulky, especially at 400 lumen. The form factor is larger than some of the competition. You also have to cycle through the courtesy and Superflash modes just to get at the different steady state modes, which is unfortunate. A lot of lights now have a double click which will access flash modes. Also, like with a lot of USB lights, the low battery status indicator is very non-obvious. You can't really check the battery status and you just have to wait for that low status to show once you have less than 10%. Now let's give the lights a final rating. I think across the board I would give these an 8.4 out of 10. They're really bright and budget-friendly set of lights. They lack some of the modern features such as the Garmin mount or DRLs, but they make up for that in the fact that they're very affordable, and with that clean beam design you get a really great beam pattern for commuting with. Thanks for watching this review. Hopefully this review helped you determine which light you want to purchase. You can find more content from us on our website at thesweetcyclist.com, as well as follow us on Instagram at thesweetcyclist. This is The Sweet Cyclist reminding you to enjoy the ride.